And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. Very excited to be with you as we finally can put the 2020-2021 coaching carousel to bed. And so we're going to do it with a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of a review, and of course, our grades for each and every hire. In total, we have 15 of them. 7 of them came from the Power 5. 8 of them came from the Group of 5. We are going to at least give a grade and a comment for each and every one of these. It was an extensive coaching season as we began, all the way back with Southern Miss, right? That's where this thing started in earnest back in like week 3. Week 3. Where Jay Hopson leaves and then the interim coach then also leaves. But we will get to that. Southern Miss, of course, Will Hall, former Tulane offensive coordinator, is actually the hire there. We will get to that one in a little bit. Without spending too much time on the big picture things, I do think there is one big picture question, which is, were you surprised at all in totality with the coaching moves that were made? Because it was posited in the offseason heading into the year that because of the pandemic and because of everything that was going on within college football, either coaches might get a pass, or because of financial constraints within college athletics as a whole, it might not be feasible to make a move on a coach. And there might be some coaches who did end up maintaining their position for some of those reasons. But I think that especially when we see 4 jobs change hands in the SEC, again, 7 of them at the Power 5 level, you could also argue that it was no impact at all. Nobody was concerned about COVID, because if you pass the hat around and there's enough money in there, well, hey, guess what? Now we can afford a buyout. So surprised at all as it broke down, or do you feel like you learned anything or any notes from a coaching carousel in a season that has been unlike any other in college football?
I would say that there was some surprise and there was some stuff that I wasn't surprised about. In that going into the season, I was one of the people saying, I don't think there'll be too much movement this year in the coaching carousel, but that was just clearly me being naive. But I thought that with like the lack of, the revenue drop this year, I thought, and just the conditions and situation, I thought maybe some schools would be lenient. So I was surprised that we even saw 15 jobs change. What wasn't surprising is that over a quarter of those changes took place in the SEC, because I figured if there was a conference that was going to say, yeah, we don't care, we'll soldier through, we've got the money, we've got people willing to pay to get these guys out and get the guys in, it would be the SEC. So the fact that they had 4 of the 15 changes and 4 of the 7 Power 5 changes, that was not a surprise.
So I think Tom's exactly right there. I mean, I think when the whole COVID thing started, we're like, oh, I don't know how many teams are actually going to, make changes. But you got to remember the stock market does not always indicate what the economy is doing. But the people who are paying the buyouts, specifically like the boosters you hit up to pay those buyouts, are heavily in the stock market, and the stock market has been awesome. So they're like, yeah, cool. We got $30 million for Gus or whatever it was. Also how many actual, firings were there? I think 12 of these were firings, and 3 were folks who were hired away.
Effect.
Yeah, one guy retired. So I mean, of actual buyouts paid to fire a coach, I think we're at like 11 or 12 here, and that's about 10% of jobs changing place in college football. It doesn't seem, it actually seems less than we normally have. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was still down. It just wasn't quite as down as maybe we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, our average, I think, is like 21, 22.
Yeah.
Something like the really busy years get up to 25 or so, but for it to be 15, it is without a doubt a little bit less. Okay, I've got these organized by conference more or less, but I want to begin with Steve Sarkisian's hire at Texas. Fascinating because of sort of the way it broke down, the timing. Not that the timing was confusing, it was the timing of the fire and the hire. That as soon as the college football playoff semifinals, the Rose Bowl's done, Alabama's on to the national championship game. The next day, that Sunday, not that Sunday, January 2nd, we get the news that Tom Herman is out as Texas's coach. It's like, wow, why would you wait until now? We had the vote of confidence. But The reason that you waited until now is because you had to wait until Steve Sarkisian was available. And so fire Tom Herman, hire Steve Sarkisian. The whole thing is wrapped up in about, 4 hours, maybe even on an official level. So we can give it a love it, we can give it a like it, and we can give it a don't get it. We're borrowing this, Bud. Thanks, of course, from Barton and Bud, and of course we'll have some elaboration within it. Bud, since you introduced the grading system, Steve Sarkisian's hire at Texas as the hire, what kind of grade did you give it?
So on the love it, get it, don't get it scale, or are we going love it, get it, don't get it, or love it, like it, don't get it?
Ooh,
I like it. I love it. I want some more of it.
Yeah, I think love it, like it, don't get it, because a like it has to be positive. I'll introduce a get it that's sort of between a like it and don't get it. Where I might not like it, but it's like, okay, I see what you're doing.
I did not stick to the trio, so.
All right, I'm going to give it a get it, right? In order for me to give it a love it, it needs to be your school went out and got like the obvious, no doubt candidate that there are really clear reasons why he is so much better than everybody else. Like the guy Texas just fired in Tom Herman, right? Like why he's a perfect fit. And we went over that, I think, in a prior podcast. So I'm going to give this a get it. I think there are clearly things that people who have worked with Steve Sarkisian really like about him that maybe we can't even see from the outside. And what we can see from the outside are very positive things as far as his ability to work with that offense, to be creative. I think he's a solid recruiter, but yet he also had Alabama's players, right? And I mean, a lot of guys have produced very similar results with Alabama's level players who didn't turn out to be great head coaches. Jim McElwain did it, right? I mean, Lane Kiffin, we'll see how he does at Ole Miss. Like they've had a lot of offensive coordinators there through Bama with Nick Saban's players who have gone on and not been home runs. So I'm going to give it, and I get it. I think it's a solid move. Is it a major upgrade from Tom Herman? I think like end of career Tom Herman at Texas, yes. But do I like this move better than the move when they went to get Tom Herman? No.
Yeah, I'm in that same area. I'm my grade for this is neutral. I don't know if it's like what you were saying. I don't think this is like an obvious improvement over what you had. I feel like this is kind of just like the same horse of a different color kind of situation. It's just Sark just got a wash. His mane is a little more lustrous right now than Tom Herman's is. But I look at the situation, it's like, yeah, he put together a very good offense at Alabama. And it was a very, it's simple is probably the wrong word, but it was kind of a simple, very effective, very dangerous offense. And it was run with tremendous personnel that made it look terrific. And if he could bring that to Texas, and he could bring, you're not going to get that same Alabama level of personnel, but if you could at least increase the talent level there and maybe have one of the more talented teams in the Big 12 and top 10 in the country kind of talent, and you put it in that offense, maybe it works out just as well for you there. But I just don't think this is the clear, obvious upgrade over what you already had. And also just concerns off the field stuff. Like we've spent a whole lot of time talking about the Texas job and how much more goes into it than just being a football coach. And Danny has said, he's told us, Steve has that kind of politician type personality to where he can schmooze and be the guy in the room that's, making everybody feel important and making everybody feel happy. It's just, we can't, or at least I can't look past the fact of why Steve Sarkisian left USC. What was going on in that situation? Now he's stepping into a very high pressure job in which he's going to have to be spending a lot of time schmoozing with boosters. And fair or not, to me, that is a legitimate concern about the fit for him in this job.
So can I push back real quick before Chip goes? Because I do think this is an upgrade over what they had in Tom Herman. I just don't know this is a better hire at the time of hire than it was over Tom Herman. Like coaching searches are crapshoots. I mean, look at Harbaugh at Michigan. Look at Herman at Texas. I mean, I think we would have all said love it at the time, or maybe we did if we go back and roll the tape. I would have. I think his relationship with the boosters will be better than what Herman's was at the end of Herman's tenure. Obviously, I don't think he'll make mistakes of just some of like the personal relationship mistakes that Herman made, and some of the stuff flipping off the Longhorn Network and just things that are kind of symbolic and silly and like unforced errors that Herman made. But I don't want to say he's not going to succeed there. he very well could. It's Texas. Like, you have all the resources in the world.
Love it. Capital
Ooh.
L, love it. And you're right, Tom, because this is where I bring up the experience, especially in comparison to Herman, because Herman came, obviously extensive, sort of track record and path as an assistant before he was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But in terms of head coaching experience, he takes over Texas after just a couple of years with Houston, right? I mean, there's just a lot more lessons. You cut a tree open, you count the rings. Like, Sark's got some rings. Like, he took over Washington when Washington was in a really bad spot. And yes, we had some jokes with 7-win Sark during his time in Seattle. And yes, his time at USC did end unceremoniously, but in terms of not only whatever he's been able to gather and soak up during his time at shout out to Michael Felder, Nick Saban School for Wayward Boys in Tuscaloosa. Like, he also has a lot of experience running major college football programs. And I think that in that sense, especially in comparison to Herman, he is just going to be a little bit more in tune to some of that more abstract stuff that even I'm not going to be totally dialed into, just because I'm not a head coach. I've never had to deal with some of those problems, some of those day-to-days, and the management real side of being a college football coach. I think offensively, the work that he did at Alabama certainly is a product of having fantastic Alabama players, the best roster in the entire country. But I do think it also brings him as an offensive coach. I mean, we're talking about somebody who came up on the USC staff, right? I mean, he could be stuck back in old school pro style days and let the game pass him by. He has shown a willingness to be able to adapt and evolve and try to find ways to stay right on, maybe not ahead of the curve, but at least on the curve, so that he is able to be as modern as possible. And then finally, the personal side, I will admit that this is me buying in to the hope and buying into the opportunity for Steve Sarkisian to have some success, to be able to have redemption's weird. That's a loaded word that I don't like, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Or a bounce back, like a real professional bounce back after the way things ended at USC. And I that is where the love it part of it, I will admit that there's some emotion there. I love it for what it is, what he's bringing, his experience. I love it for what he showed as Alabama's offensive coordinator, and Alabama's offensive coordinator, especially after the season that Alabama had. That is, regardless of who it is, that's going to be one of your top head coaching candidates for a Power 5 job. And then the personal opportunity that he has right there. Love it. No pushback. Am I out too strong?
You're entitled to your love.
Am I drunk on narrative right here? I'm already, like, I will not pin the flowery column that's going to be written too soon, which will be written too soon.
Probably has been written.
Maybe already has been written, but I will say that I'm hopeful that narrative is something that is not false as he takes over. Okay, that is the only Big 12 change. Now we move into the Southeastern Conference, where, as you correctly pointed out, if there is a league that is going to fearlessly move on, it is going to be the SEC, and it comes after we already saw Missouri, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. So that means we've got 8 of the 14 jobs have all changed hands in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Turnover in the Southeastern Conference has been wild. All right, let's start with, I think this was the first one, but Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Tom?
I don't get it. It was like, it was the name when that job first came open. It was the name that was brought up by, just kind of like a candidate. And right away I was like, okay, interesting. I think there are better candidates out there, but I feel like that could be like a solid backup option. But I did not get the sense from the way that search went that Beamer was a backup option as much as he was might have been the number one option for him. And maybe it's going to work. Maybe it's not. He's been on a lot of, obviously, he's got a good bloodline for college football coaches. He's been on a lot of good staffs. He's worked under a lot of good coaches. So I guess I do understand all that. It's just, if I'm South Carolina and I'm looking at the condition of my program, I think I would be more inclined to get somebody I feel like had a higher floor, just because I feel like I need to raise up where I am as a program. But I would agree that Beamer probably has a higher ceiling than some of the other guys. I thought Hugh Freeze made a ton of sense for this job, but apparently, there really wasn't a ton of interest in Freeze from the people in charge at South Carolina. But this is just not a hire to me that I'm excited about. It's a hire to me that I think is exciting. Like, the fan base can talk itself into before the season starts. But I just feel like this is going to be one of those jobs where in a couple years from now, we're probably going to be looking for a new South Carolina head coach. And as our friend Barton used to put it, it pays to be a really nice guy.
It does pay to be a really nice guy. Chip and I actually have a bet on this, right? I believe you, Chip. What's the actual bet? It's
both Josh Heupel and Shane Beamer will make it to the end of their
first contracts.
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good about that one still. So I'm going to go with don't get it as well. Now, I have read the rationale. I understand why they targeted Shane Beamer. They think that he was part of the Spurrier recruiting machine when they were getting Jadeveon Clowney and all those guys. But I don't think that's replicable for a number of reasons.
Because they were coming to play for Spurrier, not Shane Beamer.
And they're not there anymore. The players in the state. I did some research on this. That like 3-year period was 150% more talented than any 3-year average since, right? Like, that was just a unicorn event in the state of South Carolina, that you also, like, not only that you got those guys, but that those guys were even in your state in those quantities. And so it's like, congrats, you're really good at recruiting in the state of South Carolina. That's probably good enough to go 2-6 in the SEC. You got to be better elsewhere. And look, maybe he'll recruit well. I certainly get it a little more now than I did when it first was like, they're not seriously going to do this, right? But I think if that's your reaction, like, they're not seriously going to do this, which is what mine was, I think you have to go with don't get it. I think there were better candidates out there. So we'll see what South Carolina does. But I think Tom's right as far as the ceiling. Like, this is definitely a high variance hire. He could totally bomb. He could succeed fairly well. But I also wonder what success looks like at South Carolina.
Pays to be a nice guy, but that doesn't mean I have to get it. Also give it a don't get it. We turn our attention in the SEC East to Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm going to go ahead and say Clark Lee, I love it, but I don't get the staff hires. I don't get Clark Lee's staff hires at all. He is just getting guys with no other experience, just plucking them out from the podcast world and deciding to give them full-time jobs with the university. But realistically, Clark Lee, Nashville native, Vanderbilt alum, has done a fantastic job with Notre Dame's defense, but also every single time he was made available for press conferences or anything else, does a great job of presenting a plan. I am biased. I'll go ahead and get the ball rolling on this. I'm going to say Clark Lee, especially for Vanderbilt, pretty perfect fit. Love it.
I like it. Not going to love it, Mr. Steele, your co-host, but I like it. I think it makes all the sense in the world for Vanderbilt. I mean, he's an alum. He's played there. He's somebody who has a passion for the program and who wants Vanderbilt football to be something other than the team the rest of the SEC looks at on their schedule and says, well, there's our win. He's somebody who understands the town, the city. He understands the potential of what they could do for the program. So to hire somebody to come in with that kind of, just not plan, but the vision and the passion to make it succeed at a place that he cares about, I think that's a very good move. And I think that of the potential candidates, and there are other good candidates out there, I think that is what puts him over the top. So I like it. But again, I can't love it because he stole our co-host.
So On my scale, just the love it, get it, don't get it. I got to go with get it. And the reason is because I've already on record as saying what I thought Vanderbilt should do on the Barton and Bud podcast, like 2 months ago. And my thought was that Vanderbilt, because we know that recruiting rankings really accurately predict what you will be on defense, much more than they do on offense, your ability to play above and beyond what you recruit is primarily what can you do on offense. So I thought Vanderbilt, really should have considered looking offensive. And if they did go defense, and I think there's a pretty good argument for going defense with Clark Lee because he knows the city, because he's from there, because he understands the town and how to recruit to the culture. I certainly get that. Can they be different enough on offense? I think Vanderbilt has to be a special prep, right? You are going to have, even if Barton knocks it out of the park, they're never going to have top half talent in the East, right? They're always going to have bottom third talent if you compare it to the rest of the league, just based on who you can get in there. I think if you want to try to get to bowls at Vanderbilt, you need to go 4-0 in the non-conference every year, and you need to steal some wins. And I think the way you have to do that primarily is that you catch teams sleeping, right? It's like, oh, Vanderbilt sucks. We won't prep for them that hard this week. Hey, you know what? Vandy does some stuff that's actually pretty unique on offense that we didn't prep for quite as hard. We didn't take them quite as seriously. And then, it's not like we can just flip the switch and play harder. It's, oh, shoot, we didn't take our prep this week quite as hard. So I'm really interested to see how different Vanderbilt can be on offense, because I think Clark Lee is a tremendous defensive coach, and I'll buy that he can get them to play somewhat above the recruiting rankings on defense. But we know, like, the facts are the facts. Bill Connolly's numbers prove this out every year. You are pretty much on defense what you recruit. It's height, weight, speed, hustle, with few exceptions. How different can you be on offense?
Have a fullback on his offense?
Yeah. I mean, I think they're going, kind of air raid, because they got Cliff's guy in there. I had his name written down on where my sheet went. So I'll give it I get it. If I was going to use like the like it, love it scale, I guess I would go like it. But I'll say get it. There,
Clark Lee was with Dave Clawson at Wake Forest early in that process. And I apologize. I've taken this to Wake Forest again. I'm getting chastised for bringing up Wake Forest too much on this podcast. But is there a development path that you can take where defensively you are like your height, weight, speed, hustle, and granted, like weight is part of development as you build out these bodies to be able to make them better? Because when I think about the way the system really worked at Notre Dame, like the dudes would become stars, but they would become stars when they were seniors. And it was because they kind of got this get old and stay old mentality on that side of the ball, really focus on player development. And I wonder, do you think that is a path that you can take where you are able to exceed your raw talent rankings and ratings a little bit on the defensive side of the ball?
I think so. I mean, I think he's shown that developmental ability. That's why I'm giving, and I get it. I think if you hired any other defensive coach other than Clark Lee, I would probably give it, and I don't get it. Because like you just had that guy with a really great track record on defense, tried to out defense people, didn't work. I think it's possible.
Auburn made a move on Gus Malzahn, and after a long coaching search, twists with turns, we got Bo Jackson on the search committee again. We got entertaining all kinds of rumors and man, like is Lane Kiffin going to leave Ole Miss for Auburn? And it's just had so much in the pot, and then it's Boise State's Bryan Harsin, which, okay, all right. Bryan Harsin's done a pretty good job at Boise State. Don't really know what his connections are to Auburn, but I remember on our emergency podcast, it sort of got met with a lot of just nodding. And yeah, sure, he's a good football coach. Good football coach. Yeah, he might be okay. Let's see what staff he hires. And certainly a lot of the hires that he's made to that staff are coaches with SEC connections, coaches that we assume will help him be able to establish a recruiting footprint in a way that will make up for whatever inexperience that he has in the region. Bryan Harsin, I'll throw this one back to you, Bud. What kind of grade did you give it?
I gave it a get it. I don't know that he's necessarily an upgrade over Gus, but I also, look, I respect your option to throw around a lot of money if you're just tired of something and want to have some change. Like we know the reasons that Auburn fired Gus. Their recruiting was slipping a little bit. They were not competitive in the state of Georgia. They were worried that, they were losing Mobile area a little more, that Clemson was coming in and winning recruiting battles against them in places that they normally would win some battles. But like, this was probably like some of the people who were involved with this were trying to get Kevin Steele installed as the head coach and then trying to get Travis Williams to be the eventual head coach down the line. It was sort of this whole Auburn grand plan thing, and it fell apart. So like, let's not pretend like this was an obvious option who they had to go get. For that reason, I can't give it a love it. I also am not convinced it's an upgrade, but unlike what South Carolina did, Bryan Harsin's a proven competent head coach who I think has a high floor and decent upside there. Is he going to run down Nick Saban or Kirby Smart? I highly doubt it, but I get it.
I like it. And I think I like it for a lot of the things you just said. Is I think that it is considering, and maybe this went into my grading process, considering the thought of like the whole Kevin Steele coup taking over.
Thank you for mentioning that. I should have mentioned it in the intro because I was taking my notes. I was like, this had lots of twists and turns. It was a really dramatic search. The dramatic search is that a high-powered booster had laid out a plan of the way this thing was going to go, and it was foiled. It was incredible.
Yeah. So for as dramatic as the search seemed, for it to end on like what I feel like is a stable, reasonable, good football coach and not some crazy stuff, I give it a like it, because I do think Bryan Harsin is a good football coach, but I do think that the concerns are like you were talking about, Bud. We don't know. He hasn't coached in the SEC. He hasn't coached at this job. He took over a Boise State program that was in pretty good condition, and he maintained it. And it was starting to slip a little bit, according to fans, people close to the program. They had concerns going forward. But from the outside, from my view, things looked like Boise State to me. And I think that if he could just kind of bring that solid, kind of just consistent floor, because the thing is with Gus, like, there were all those concerns about the recruiting and stuff. But to me, the other concern about Auburn was you bring in Gus, who is supposed to be the offensive guru. But in the last few years, we have seen Auburn's offense become secondary to its defense as the offense has slipped. And I feel like if your head coach is an offensive guru and he has a better defense than he does offense, that's a problematic sign to me. So I think that Harsin coming in, as long as he has that good staff around him that could help him transition to living in the SEC and recruiting in the SEC and help buy him some time to get into, to get his feet wet and get settled, I think that this could prove to be a very solid hire with very similar results to what you were already getting, but possibly a little more consistency from year to year and a little bit better idea of knowing what you're going to get, and maybe a quarterback that actually improves over his career.
I like it because of how perfect to the script it is in terms of the way that we expect like coaching searches to work. Like this almost is the way that it would play out in an NCAA football dynasty where, granted, ignoring that it's Boise State and the juggernaut he took over, but it's coach wins three conference titles in, 5 or 6 years, averages about, 10, 11 wins per season, has about 4 top 25 finishes. And guess what? Now you are the top candidate to take a step up. Like this is moving up the ladder in a way that fits the traditional script. We don't always see the traditional script, especially with so many retreads and so many coaches that are able to work in the same cycle. And so for Bryan Harsin, like this is your opportunity. This is your chance to be able to show your coaching chops per se and prove that, you're not just somebody that's going to be a lifer where you are comfortable, that this is a skill set from the coaching perspective, from the program building perspective that you can take on the road. So like it, get it. And man, I hope I don't again forget to mention the incredible Kevin Steele coup of 2020.
All right. I'm going to throw this out there since we just finished the SEC.
No, we still got Tennessee.
Oh, well.
You want to throw it out there anyway?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Well, now I'm only going to be thinking about what it's going to be while we're talking about Tennessee.
Hey, here we go. Josh Heupel, don't get it. All right, go.
You don't get it? I get it. And I think this, Bud, you've mentioned this when we first did like the emergency reaction kind of podcast to this. Like, I get it in the sense that Danny White comes from UCF, coming into a very tumultuous situation in the Tennessee athletic department. And I don't think Josh Heupel, like, you know, when it comes to coaching searches, there's so much you hear from different people and different sources. And you never know what's true, what's just agent talk pushing their client, what's going on. But even saying that we never really 100% know, I think it is safe to say that Josh Heupel was not Danny White's number one choice to follow him to Knoxville from UCF to take over that program. But I think that Tennessee right now is a job that is probably not going to be that attractive to a lot of the coaches that would have been Danny White's top choices. So I think Heupel, he kind of knew, he's familiar with him. He obviously believes in him. He hired him at UCF. So he kind of had him there as like, all right, I'm going to swing for the fences with these guys. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to bring in the guy I know. So I get it. But like you've mentioned, Bud, that this is a kind of a perfect situation for Tennessee and for Danny White, to where they could spend the next few years just trying to clean up the mess. And if Heupel starts winning games and everything's working out, awesome. That is a dream scenario. Now Heupel's your coach. If it doesn't, maybe Heupel just helps you kind of clean things up a little bit. So that way the job is more attractive in 3 or 4 years from now when it's time to find somebody else to take over. So I get it. I don't think Josh Heupel is a home run hire. I think he's a solid hire. I think he has a chance to win. I don't think he has I don't have a lot of faith in Josh Heupel turning Tennessee into an SEC East dynamo.
Yeah, I get it as well. I think you have to grade these on a curve, right? I mean, if Texas had hired Josh Heupel, I would have said I don't get it. But if you're Tennessee in this situation, I very much get it, right? I think I would have given Danny White a love it, right? Like the hire of Danny White is a love it. I think the hire of Danny White is a long-term hire. I would expect Danny White, as my bet with Chip indicates, we'll have to make another hire, in the next 4 or 5 years. Josh Heupel is reasonably competent. He will score some points, probably sell some tickets. But look, Danny White and Josh Heupel didn't kneecap Tennessee. Tennessee did that to themselves. So I can't give it, don't get it personally for that, because I'm pretty sure other guys didn't want this job. It's not that desirable when you have the NCAA sword potentially hanging over you.
Do you think that when Josh Heupel was hired by UCF, were you excited by it? Because I wasn't coming out of offensive coordinator Josh Heupel thinking that thinking that was like, ooh, here we go. He's been tearing it up there. I mean, this is still the Josh Heupel who like lost his job back in 2014 at Oklahoma, where that Oklahoma offense in the early part of the decade had fallen off from the Sam Bradford era, and it was pre-Lincoln where things really took off again. And I think that you can say get it, especially with the Danny White connection, but I don't know that the Josh Heupel Missouri offensive coordinator has done anything to erase concerns or at least a lack of belief or faith. And I don't know that UCF head coach Josh Heupel has thrown me anything to have me 100% on board either.
Yeah, I can't remember what my grade was exactly, but I know when we were looking at it the other week when we were going over this stuff, I think I gave Heupel at UCF like a C+, just because, I thought UCF was a more desirable job than taking the OC from Missouri at the time.
It's fair. So here's what I was going to throw out. Appearances in the SEC title game for these 4 coaches at their current jobs over the course of their career at these jobs. Over under 1.5.
Under.
Yeah.
Except
that's probably a bad number. That's all right. We'll put that on the board for Tom. That's probably a freebie. I should have said 1.
Well, then you still got to go under and hope for a push. That you might get 1 from Bryan Harsin. Is that the way that you?
I think that's the thought.
Math? Yeah. And this is where, like, over the course of their career, Harsin's starting a couple laps behind Jimbo. Like, even if you want to look ahead to the post-Saban era in the West, I think Jimbo's running a couple laps ahead right there. It's going to very quickly become tough to close that gap as well. But Gus Malzahn did it. So he was able to prove that it can be done. Coming up on the other side, there is a coach who's bringing that big energy back to Champaign. We're going to get into him and the rest of the coaching changes next. I was once again blinded by my joy for the just sort of the energy around this hire right here. I gave a capital L, love it, to Bret Bielema at Illinois. He has been a beloved character in the college football universe. And him being there in the Big Ten West at Illinois, I think is very interesting. And Tom, I know that you're very, very connected and understand the many things that have happened since the hire. Was it love it initially and still love it? Like how are you grading this as we sit here in mid-February?
Like it initially, like it now. I think that I think it's a smart, sensible, reasonable hire for Illinois after the experiment they tried with Lovie Smith, where it was, all right, let's really swing for the fences with something kind of crazy and wild. And Lovie Smith came in and he did a lot to help kind of put a new foundation down. He helped with raising money to put in like their new facilities that they have. But I think that they kind of just hit a wall with that staff and the lack of experience and just, networking that they had within the college football landscape to really push further forward. So now it makes a ton of sense to me that you hire a coach who has experience within your division, experience at a winning program you're trying to emulate, experience in the SEC where he had some success and he also failed in the end in that he lost his job, but he learned a lot from that job. So that kind of experience helps him help mold him into what he wants to do or what he needs to fix, what he can do, what he can't do. And I think you also have a coach who is excited to be back at the college level, because if you listen to his press conferences since he's taken the job, like he enjoyed the time in the NFL, but Bret Bielema is a college coach and he has wanted to get back into college. It's what he enjoys doing. So I think when you look at all that, you look at the experience, you look at the knowledge he has, you look at the coaching staff he's hired, which is a very knowledgeable coaching staff and a very experienced coaching staff. I mean, I think he's got like 3 or 4, former or current defensive coordinators that he hired from other staffs to take over on his team. I think offensively, he's taken, he brought in Tony Peterson, who has had success at multiple schools at different levels, G5 and P5, and including success in the Big Ten when he was at Minnesota during the Marion Barber and the 1,000-yard rusher days of all those guys. So I feel like the floor for this hire at the program of Illinois is raised considerably than where it was. Now, are they going to be competing for division titles and going to Indianapolis playing for conference titles? I don't know. There's a lot of work left that still needs to get there. But I think that for where Illinois can realistically be compared to where it has been for most of the last couple decades, I think this is a very, very good hire for him. So I like it.
I'll stick with get it here. I think the reasons that Tom just laid out make a lot of sense, right? When he first got hired, I was like, man, I don't know if I get this one, but digging into a little more, I've kind of come around on it some. My major concern here is that he's going to try to play bully ball against a bunch of teams that have better talent than he does. And we saw how well that worked out at Arkansas. It didn't, right? It resulted in a lot of 3rd and 7. Has he learned from that? Like, are they willing to be a little bit more different? Or does he think because of his Midwest recruiting connections that he can get, enough talent there to play his style, which he might be able to do, and then consistently go to bowl games, which, I mean, I'm not an Illinois fan. I'm guessing that's kind of the goal, is like consistently go to bowls.
Just don't be embarrassing.
Yeah. It's sort of the Kentucky deal, right? Like hoops is first, football second. Please give us something to watch that's okay in the off season for basketball. Right. At least as far as I understand.
I mean, run the ball, keep it close. That's one way to keep games entertaining.
I mean, yeah, my read of Illinois fans, as far as the football fans of the school are concerned, is like, Yeah, basketball is probably always going to be the number one thing at Illinois, but just for football, it's like, give us a couple things to be happy about every season. I don't think no Illinois fans sitting here thinking, oh, we're going to win. We're going to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Like, nobody has that as their objective. It's like, dude, just can we get some 7-8 win seasons, and maybe once in a while we spring up and, win a division title or something. The Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin model is all Illinois fans want.
So there are 16 Big Ten rivalry trophies. Illinois specifically is involved with 3 of them: the Land of Lincoln Trophy, Illabuck, which is a fantastic trophy, and the Purdue Cannon. I am so sad that we don't have an Illinois-Wisconsin trophy. And what can it be when Bret Bielema faces the program that he led to high points and peaks because the Badgers don't have a national championship in the entire program history. So those seasons that Bielema had at Wisconsin, some of the most successful in the program history. What would be a good rivalry trophy for Illinois, Wisconsin?
A white bass.
A white bass. That's specific, and I love it.
Just feel like you could find them in lakes and rivers in both states.
The white bass trophy. You heard it here first on Cover 3. All right, one more Power 5.
Big Ten.
Yes, very Big Ten. One more Power 5 change. Kevin Sumlin out at Arizona. Jed Fisch hired. I just even beyond don't get it. Just uninspired. A real wet sandwich of a hire for me. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird because this is what I feel like of the Power 5 jobs. This was the one that kind of just, I know Jed Fisch. I know his name. I've heard his name floated for all sorts of jobs in the last few years. I've seen him, as members of staffs at Michigan, at UCLA. He's been in the NFL. He has all that experience. It's just, I don't feel like even knowing all that, I don't feel like I know anything about Jed Fisch. And I just think that when Arizona makes the hire, this is an absolute wild card to me. So I'm going with don't like it just because I don't know enough really to have a solid, coherent opinion. And I know that's not what we're supposed to do in this industry, but that's just the God's honest truth.
I'm going to say don't get it. From like some of the early reports, it seems one of his major selling points was that he's tight with the president, which I'm not really sure helps you that much on Saturdays or on the recruiting
States
trail.
President?
No, the school president.
Yeah. If you were tight with the U.S. president, that actually might help you some. And yet I do think he's an upgrade from the version of Kevin Sumlin they got. So I'm gonna kind of straddle this. I don't get it. I don't really. He wasn't really on my radar when they were looking for people. Not that I was super clued into the Arizona coaching search, but it doesn't stand out as something that is obviously makes sense. Could happen. I know he's coached out there. What was it, UCLA for a while? He's bounced around a whole lot. He was at Miami. I think he was at Michigan, some NFL stuff, but I still don't get it. And yet I think he'll be an upgrade.
Yeah. Like to me, when the Arizona job came open, Brent Brennan made a lot of sense to me as a possible option. I don't know if there was just no interest there, if they just weren't interested or what. It was just, I felt like, although it could also be that after getting Kevin Sumlin and having that it fail pretty spectacularly for them, maybe they just didn't want to go. And, before that was Rich Rod. Maybe they just said, you know what, we're done hiring former Power 5 head coaches and giving them second or third chances or whatever. Let's find the next big thing. And maybe they talked themselves into thinking Jed Fisch is the next big thing. And maybe he is.
I mean, you could have gone back to Ken Niumatalolo. That could have been there for you.
Yeah, because what's his name's gone.
Killed my dream.
Khalil Tate is not there to block the hire. Brett Brennan from San Jose State had just led one of the best seasons in program history for the Spartans. I'm down for a don't get it for Jed Fisch. We just talked about this one. Happened earlier in the week. UCF, Gus Malzahn. It's the only job that changed hands in the American. Love it. Upgrade from Josh Heupel, in my opinion. And if Gus does want to stay there for a little while, then it's going to end up paying off. But I think the Knights are in a pretty good spot right now.
I'm kind of meh Like, I agree. It is an upgrade over Heupel. I think Malzahn's done a lot. It's just, as I kind of was alluding to earlier with his time at Auburn, like the shine on Gus Malzahn, offensive guru, has kind of worn off for me. Like, if you look at his time at Auburn, like the 1 year that he was, the offensive coordinator with Cam Newton as quarterback, Auburn scored 41 points per game, led the SEC. Then in his first year as head coach in 2013, they scored 40 points a game, were second in the SEC. But since then, as far as just points per game are concerned, Auburn's finished 4th, 8th, 6th, 4th, 8th, tied for 3rd, and 9th in the SEC as far as points per game. So when I think of UCF and I think of all these super explosive offenses, maybe Gus will be able to go to Orlando and do what he'd been trying to do at Auburn, and it'll work a lot better in the American than it was working in the SEC for him. That is very much a possibility. It's just, it's hard for me to be super excited about this hire, while also, again, maintaining that I do think it is an upgrade over what they had. So it's just one of those kind of weird situations for me.
I'm hesitant to use the love it because I just feel like there's no locks in college ball coaching. But I am going to use the love it here for this reason. I think Gus will kind of find some of that offensive magic again. Auburn had a long-term kind of offensive line issue that they were struggling to fix via the JUCOs and some guys getting hurt, some developmental stuff. And Bo Nix hasn't hit for him yet. We'll see what Bryan Harsin can do with Nix. But I really think Gus Malzahn can coach. And I also think that he can be sort of the resource hound that UCF, like he can go to UCF and say, hey, you guys want to joke about this national championship and all this other bullshit, right? Like you guys, if you guys really want to compete and you want to get to that next level, and if you want to get to a Power 5 conference, like this is how we do it, right? Like we spend this much money in recruiting. I'm not talking about dropping bags. I'm talking about like having this many analysts on staff, subscribing to all these different recruiting services, all these different things. I think he can kind of browbeat him a little bit and say, hey, this is what it's going to take. This is the kind of spending. Like you boosters, you want to talk about how high pressure of a job this is. You want to talk about getting to the next level and how you're P6 and all this stuff. Well, guess what? The P6 ain't real. So if we want to get to a P5, this is how we do it. Let's open up the wallets. And I do think that for UCF alone, getting those boosters to donate more and more, it's a growing school. I think that's a big part here.
Gus Malzahn really helped guide a lot of Jordan-Hare and facility renovations, like fundraise and sort of lead them, right?
Which is weird because in press conferences, he is about as boring and dull as he can be. But I think in one-on-one situations, maybe a little better.
Because I was there at Jordan-Hare in 2018, I think, and it looked like things were upgraded recently, at least around the bowels and in the team, the family, like all those areas in the tunnel where all the recruits and the recruits' families are, like all that stuff looked like it had been upgraded in recent years. I am also there with the love it. 2 changes in the Mountain West. First one, Boise State. Former Boise State linebacker, former defensive coordinator, defensive coach, Andy Avalos comes over from Oregon. He first joined Mario Cristobal's staff working for Jim Leavitt. Jim Leavitt leaves. He's promoted. Oregon's defense is pretty good, pretty solid defense. And I don't know how much of that is the recruiting, just because that's a really, really talented group that they've got from a personnel perspective. I don't have anything in my Andy and Avalos file that says he is a unique scheme defensive coach. But this seemed like they were going to be making the alumni hire no matter what way they broke it, right? It was either going to be Andy Avalos or Kellen Moore. They end up going with Avalos. I get it. I get it. I don't necessarily love it or like it. I'm not rushing with a bunch of enthusiasm. I think he inherits a lot of expectation, and you can lean on that alumni card for a couple years, but I think it'll be a big test to make sure that you're producing consistent results.
I like it. I like it with Avalos. I liked it if it would have been Kellen Moore, because I think that if you're Boise State, the blueprint's in place. You know what you have to do to succeed there, and you know how to do it. And I think because of that, it makes a whole lot of sense to hire somebody who played there and who coached there, so who has had a front row seat to how to have success at Boise, how to recruit. He's a California native, so he's spent a lot of time both at Oregon and Boise State recruiting that area. So it still kind of keeps those connections open to getting that talent to come north to Boise. So I like it. I think this is a very solid, smart hire for the Broncos, and I think that it's probably going to help maintain them as, the team to beat in the Mountain West going forward.
I'm sort of on the fence between get it and love it, to be honest here. I think Kellen Moore would have been the obvious love it, but it's maybe a tad unrealistic to think that you're going to, as a G5 school, pull the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, even if he, was like the most famous player in your history. Okay, so he's from he coached at Colorado, he coached at Boise, he coached at Oregon. He understood how to recruit out there. It's a different recruiting game west of the Rockies. I think he has a lot of good recruiting connections out there. And if you look at it, Oregon's defense has been what has been carrying them the last 2 years. Their offense has oftentimes not been very good. So he's been able to coach underrated recruits that are lowly rated, which Boise gets, and oftentimes he has to find hidden gems. He's also been able to recruit and coach top talented guys. So I'll go with get it because he's not been a head coach before, and I'm interested to see how some of his offensive hires work out. But it's kind of like get it plus. I'm a fairly big fan of this.
Yeah, never forget that. Get it plus.
For $5 a month, you can get it plus.
On all your streaming services. By the way, you should follow and stream us on Spotify. Yes. All right. Utah State gets Blake Anderson. I like it. It was a situation that comes with a lot of there's a big personal side to this for Blake Anderson as well, where I think just being able to get a fresh start. I think Blake Anderson's a pretty good coach. Those Arkansas State teams, while they weren't winning Sun Belt titles, they were without a doubt one of the top shelf teams in the Sun Belt. Pretty good offensive coach, and he takes over a Utah State program that has just been, Gary Anderson just walked out on the squad. It feels like that whole roster has just sort of been thrown around back and forth. He gets a chance to get a fresh start. Utah State gets a chance to regain its footing. I give it a like it.
I get it. I give it a get it. I think that I think I agree. I think Blake Anderson is a good football coach, but like what you talked about, Chip, I think that this is a move that is not nearly as much about football as much as it is just, life off the field. And like you said, he wanted a fresh start. I think that you can't discount the idea that after losing his wife, what was it, like a year or two ago, just getting out of Jonesboro and starting somewhere new was probably something that he felt like he needed to do just to move on. So from that, I get it. And I think that Utah State is a place where we have seen you can win at it and can have success. And, Gary Anderson before part 2 had a lot of success there during his first time. Matt Wells was successful enough there to turn that into the Texas Tech job. And I think Blake Anderson has enough success as a head coach to think that he's going to be able to win games with the Aggies. But my concern with it is just I know he has some experience as a coach in like New Mexico and in the Southwest, but he hasn't really been in that area in a long time. So I don't know how tight his connections are out there. So from somebody who has spent most of his coaching career more in the Southeast and Southwest of like Texas, New Mexico, to go to Utah, to be in a conference he hasn't coached in and with, facing a bunch of teams he's not really used to facing, I think that there could be an adjustment period. And I don't know about the fit because of that. So that could be a problem. But I do think that if we're just basing this off of football coaching, I think Utah State upgraded.
I'm going to give it an I love it. I actually like some of these G5 hires better than the P5s. And my rationale is this. Under normal circumstances, Utah State cannot pull a coach anywhere near as proven as Blake Anderson. Before the weird 2020 season, which I'll pretty much throw out, he took Arkansas State to 6 straight bowls.
Mm-hmm.
They won or tied for the conference or their division 3 times, had another second, 2 third-place finishes. The guy can coach. He runs an exciting offense. Like this is much better, I think, than Gary Anderson, who quit yet again this year, leaving his coaching staff out to dry and looking for jobs, as Godfrey pointed out on Twitter. yet again. I think this is a really nice hire for them. Tom's point about recruiting out west, I definitely think is valid. I will note that Arkansas State under Anderson has recruited Texas some, and I would expect that they would continue to recruit Texas while at Utah State. Granted, it's a little harder to get kids to go out to Utah than Texas. Yeah, exactly. But I guess I would be more concerned if they were a school that was super reliant on kids from Florida, because then that's even farther away. But he does have some connections there, sort of in the, the central part of the country.
On to Conference USA, where Marshall lands Charles Huff off of Alabama's staff. Charles Huff's been a fantastic recruiter. He was the running backs coach. He was also a great recruiter for Marshall. I'm going to give this a love it because I'm excited about what Charles Huff can do. There's just been so much positive momentum around him as an assistant, that getting the keys to a program with the history like Marshall, I'm excited about that. Now, my love it is separated from comparing him to Doc Holliday, where his ouster comes amidst some even like political drama within the state of West Virginia and within the Marshall community, where university president, athletic director, and the governor apparently did not all see eye to eye on this. So I'm separating that from my grade because I think Doc Holliday did a great job. And if I was in charge of Marshall, I would not have gotten Doc Holliday out of there. However, I'm excited about seeing Charles Huff have the opportunity as a head coach. And so I'm going to give it the love it.
I don't like it, but it's got nothing to do with Charles Huff. It's got everything to do with the decision to move on from Doc Holliday, because that is a decision to me that didn't really make a ton of sense. And as far as Huff is concerned, I get what's interesting and what's appealing about him. I mean, first of all, he's young. He's an excellent recruiter. So he's going to bring a kind of energy to the program that maybe they felt was slipping and they needed to reinvigorate. But I just have a hard time saying, like, a lot of these grades we've talked about, have you upgraded? Have you downgraded? Charles Huff could be an upgrade on Doc Holliday in the long run. But right now, based on what we know, I can't consider this an upgrade over what you already had. So because of that, I'm giving it a don't like it. And while I understand that Charles Huff has been a fantastic recruiter, he hasn't been recruiting to Marshall. Like it's going to be different trying to convince those kids to come to Marshall than it was to come to Alabama and other places. So I think it has a chance, because of his recruiting acumen, to work out very well for Marshall in Conference USA, to increase the talent of that team and maybe increase its ceiling and raise the floor at the same time. It's just based off what I know now. I hope it works. I just didn't understand the move to get rid of Doc Holliday to begin with.
I do think we kind of have to
group them together,
try to separate, because obviously, like, nobody thinks that Charles Huff is a more proven or better coach right now than Doc Holliday. I think that Huff could work out there. So after their decision to fire Doc Holliday, which I don't think was very, very smart, after that was made, I get why they would go with the hire of Huff. Marshall, geographically, it's a tough place to recruit to. But academically, it's a very favorable place to recruit to. You can get some kids to Marshall with like some creative ways, right? There's some stuff you can do that Marshall can find a way to get some kids in that maybe some other schools can't. And that's a big deal. If Huff can use his connections to get talent there, I guess one of my concerns there would be, as a first-time head coach, who is he hiring for back office staff and support staff? Like, is he able to pluck a lot of guys from Bama? What sort of connections does he have there? Because those are some of the things that do, on the margins, make or break a hire. And I wonder about some of his connections there, just based on some of the moves so far.
Wrapping up Conference USA, Southern Miss hires Will Hall, offensive coordinator under Willie Fritz at Tulane. Sure, fine, I get it. I like Willie Fritz as an offensive coach. I like Willie Fritz's offenses. Tulane's really fun because it's not totally triple option in a service academy style, but it is a little bit modernized, run out of the shotgun. It can be a lot of fun, but man, Southern Miss is just the ups and downs that program has been through. Sure. I don't know what they could have gotten in terms of trying to lure somebody to Hattiesburg. So, yeah, I'm fine. I get it.
I like it. I like it. I think the Will Hall's offenses are interesting, and because of that, Southern Miss becomes a lot more interesting to me to watch now. So I think from that sense, that's a good move. And I also think that Southern Miss, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Southern Miss was like one of the better, group of five, although it wasn't known as that at the time, but like programs in the country. I think there's plenty of potential for Southern Miss to, start getting back to being a good team, particularly in the Conference USA. And I think that Will Hall bringing his kind of fun, exciting offense might be the right path to do it. So I like this hire.
I'm going to give it a love it. I think this is absolutely about the best that Southern Miss can do. He's had to be creative with his offenses, as Tom and Chip noted. He also, look at where Will Hall has recruited throughout basically his entire cycle. I mean, okay, so Southwest Baptist, I'm actually not sure where that is, but that was in 2006. Arkansas, Monticello.
There are 13 Southwest Baptists.
Okay, well, that's a lot. This is going to be producer Coca real challenge here. West Alabama, that's pretty close to Southern Miss. West Georgia, still within the footprint. Louisiana as the OC. Memphis, again, I mean, a border state to Mississippi. Tulane, obviously recruited the hell out of the Gulf Coast. And now Southern Miss. Like, creative on offense, young up-and-comer, wanted the job. We know that other schools that maybe were going to make a move the following year, so after 2021, would have had interest in Will Hall and knows the recruiting area. I think this is, look, it's not a guarantee it's going to work, but this is about as good as Southern Miss could have asked for, I think.
Nice.
Especially because money-wise, I mean, weren't they pretty kind of sketchy money-wise a couple years ago? And some coaches were worried, like if their bonus checks were going to come on time and stuff. Like they're not flush with cash.
I mean, that might be why coaches are leaving, right?
I would think so.
Okay.
You have to buy a plane ticket to interview since you could just do it on Zoom. That was a huge
all right. Finally, we take it to the Sun Belt. A couple of former head coaches highlight this one. We start with Arkansas State, which of course Blake Anderson's out to Utah State, and they go to Tuscaloosa to the Nick Saban School of Wayward Boys. They don't even take a position coach here. We go straight, bypass that room onto the analyst room, and here comes Butch Jones. Now, Butch Jones has the success from Central Michigan, Grand Valley State. He's he sort of came up in that same line. So as he takes back over as head coach for the first time since he was complimenting 5-star Hearts and awarding the Champions of Life to everybody on the Vols, what do we think about Butch Jones at Arkansas State?
I think I get it. And I'm going to be interested to see how it works, because I think that if we look at Butch Jones at Tennessee, you're kind of like, what the hell are you doing hiring Butch Jones? But if we look at Butch Jones in his first two gigs as at Group of Five schools, he took over at Central Michigan from Brian Kelly, did well. Then he followed Brian Kelly at Cincinnati, did well. Two programs that had kind of been established and things had been put in place. Took over at Tennessee, a program that was not in a good place when he took over, and he had a difficulty maintaining it. He started building it up, but it just things, it's Tennessee. Things completely fell apart, just like things have completely fallen apart for every Tennessee coach over the last however many decades at this point. But now he's going to an Arkansas State job. Again, a Group of Five job. We just talked about Blake Anderson and the job he did at Arkansas State. Again, he's taking over a Group of Five job where there is a solid foundation in place. I think Butch can be successful at Arkansas State. To me, it makes sense from that kind of perspective.
I'm going to use get it here yet again, because I understand why they did it. I think it makes sense. Really, Tom hit on pretty much all my points. The one thing I want to point out is that basically everything that Chip listed off for his notoriety at Tennessee, by the way, Coca comes here. Southwest Baptist is a D2 school in Missouri. So, fairly close to Mississippi-ish. I mean, like kind of in the same area. They're SEC now, of course.
Hell yeah. Okay.
The state of Missouri, not Southwest Baptist. Almost all the negative stuff that Chip listed off from Tennessee was stuff that Butch Jones said. His teams weren't terrible. He was a guy who cared a lot about what the press thought of him. He read his press clippings. We know that for sure. And he just said a lot of silly, dumb stuff that in a city like Knoxville, which is absolutely a pressure cooker because there's nothing else to do there, and there's really no pro sports that are real nearby, you got to be somewhat smart with what you say. And so champions of life. And I guess the trash can on the sideline was silly. But he's had decent success elsewhere. So I get it.
Terry Bowden at ULM. I both don't get it and love it at the same time. I'm on both ends of the spectrum, and that's just because he's football royalty. And if it's anything like what happened at Akron, he's just going to roll through the Rolodex, and we'll see all the other former names and faces of previous decades of college football pop up there.
See, I love it. This is the only hire I love. I think if you're ULM and you look at what Terry Bowden has done, like Akron's the only school he's ever left so far with a losing record, but the Akron program he took over was an absolute mess. And then he went 1-11 in his first year, and then he built it up a couple 5-7 seasons, took Akron to a bowl game in 2015 after going 8-5. They went to another bowl game in 2017. And then after 2018, they let him go and they bring in Tom Arth. And what has Akron done since firing Terry Bowden? It has gone back to being a 1-win team, or maybe even a winless team. He raised the floor of that program considerably. Right now, what ULM needed was somebody who at least knows how to make a competent football program and build a competent football program. And Terry Bowden has shown already he knows how to do that. And he's brought in Rich Rod. And you're going to see, I don't think ULM is going to be sitting here winning Sun Belt titles at any point in the next couple of years, but I can't rule it out. And I think that he is going to greatly improve this condition of the program and at least put it in a position where, how old is Terry Bowden now? He is 64. So maybe Rich Rod is kind of like a coach in waiting already. Who knows?
Like they couldn't hire Rich Rod because the baggage stuff, like to be the head coach, but you can kind of get him in there as the OC.
Yeah. So maybe a few years from now, when Terry Bowden's done and kind of approaching retirement, you're in a much better position with your program to either promote Rich Rod if things are working out, or to find somebody else to come in and take it over. I think it's a great hire. I love it.
Man, Tom is like trying to drag me into saying get it, because I was going to be in the don't get it category. Fine, I get it. Tom convinced me. All right, I get it. Like, he can produce reasonably competent teams at places that are really tough to win, like Akron. I can't be with the love it though.
Hey, that's entertainment. Suspect. I've told you, I've put my heart into this. I've done entertainment factor. All right, and finally, South Alabama hires Indiana defensive coordinator Kane Wommack. Indiana has been a very good defensive team. A lot of that, I believe, has come from the Tom Allen ethos. But Kane Wommack, at the age of 33, one of the youngest coaches now in college football. I say get it. But some of my get it is with excitement, because I think South Alabama can be a program where Kane Wommack can do good things with some time to build.
I like it. I liked Indiana's defense, and I like what Tom, Allen has done at Indiana with like the kind of culture that he has created. And I think that, Kane Wommack, yeah, you're right. He's only 33, but he does have experience at South Alabama. He spent a couple of years there as the defensive coordinator before going to Indiana to be the linebackers coach. But he has gotten a very good firsthand view of Tom Allen's building that program and building that culture. So he kind of has help in that kind of blueprint. And now he's going to try to bring that to South Alabama to help build because this is still a very young, as far as, FBS level, a very young program, to try to help kind of put in a foundation. I think that this is somebody who could turn out to be good. And plus, at only 33, maybe this becomes, something that he helps build and he's there for a while. And then maybe eventually he moves on to a Power 5 gig. But if you're South Alabama and you find yourself at a point where Kane Wommack is attracting Power 5 interest, that means great things have been happening for you.
I get it. He's very young, not super experienced, but his entire career has been spent in and around where you have to recruit, right? He played for Arkansas. He played for Southern Miss. Then, think about the areas that South Alabama is going to recruit, right? You're going to recruit the Gulf Coast. You're going to recruit Mississippi. You're going to recruit kind of, Memphis area. You're going to go into, Southwest Georgia some, and you got to dip into Florida some. That's basically where you're at. UT Martin, Jacksonville State, which is in Alabama, not Florida. Ole Miss, which I believe is when he was there with Tom Allen. Eastern Illinois. So for 2 years, he was gone, but he was getting some DC experience. Then he was South Alabama's DC for 2 years. He spent 3 seasons at Indiana under Tom Allen, who, has done a nice job there and obviously was in the South for a lot of his career. And now he's back. So I get it. I could see this working out. The lack of experience kind of keeps me from saying love it.
Well, I love this, and y'all did a fantastic job. You can follow him on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Mailbag coming up later in the week. Remember, you can always get in with a 5-star review. Leave your review. Put your question in there. We'll add it to the big old bag of mail. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.